Good morning, y'all. Welcome to this coaches panel talk. Thanks for being here this morning, and thank you to StuySplash for hosting us. My name's Owen. I coach FRC 8513 Sisters First out of Morristown, New Jersey, and I'm going to start by having our coaches introduce ourselves. Gentlemen.
Yeah, so I'm Joe Blay. I am the head coach and drive coach for Team 694, and also the head coach for our new team 516 StuySplash.
I'm Justin Melnitsky. I am one of the mentors on Team 353, the Pobots, along with the drive coach.
Hi, I'm Anash. I'm the head coach and drive coach of Team INT Robotics 9642.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here today. So the goal for this is to have some amount of community questions. If y'all want to know how these coaches run their teams, how they run their drive teams, we have a lot of experience up here. So we definitely want to take some communal questions. And then I have some here that we might be able to hit, could tie into some of yours. But if you have a question, you can give a little hand raise, try to catch my eye, and I'll come to you when we have the next break. So is there a question out there that anyone had top of their mind that we wanted to start with? All right, if you have one, if something comes up, let me know. But we'll start down here. At a high level, what qualities about yourself do you think make you a good drive coach? What should other drive coaches try to emulate that you think really helps you?
I think that, well, I'm a teacher, so I'm a teacher here at Sty, and I think, being a teacher, constantly trying to, educate people, I think really helps, and helps with, listening skills, hearing what other kids on other teams are saying, or, the subtext of what they're saying. So, I think one of the biggest roles of the drive coach is, prepping the alliance, right? Making sure the alliance is all on the same page. And I think most alliances, they'll go through what the strategy is, or review it in the queue. And I think one of the things I'm really good at is just using my teaching skills, what is this kid actually saying? Oh, okay. All right, was there trepidation in their voice when they said that? And then we can catch that discomfort then and address it instead of mid-match when we have an issue.
For me, it's the ability to step into any situation and help moderate and diffuse a potential escalated situation. I think a big part of being a mentor drive coach is having that adult leadership in the room and being able to stop any arguments that might come out, while also making sure that everyone is okay with the game plan moving forward, similar to what Joe was saying. Ensure everyone knows what the strategy is prior to the match. So just going in cool, calm, and collected, understanding what everyone's outputs should be, and being able to execute that plan and demonstrate it.
Cool. And
I've drive coached for a little less years in this group. But the thing that I identify with that has helped me become a better drive coach over time is the fact that I'm not the best at it because there are thousands. In Worlds, there's even more of those. A lot of them of some of the most competitive teams in the world. And I've coached matches with them, and I remember those matches to the detail of everything that happened, everything I learned. So it's not filling my own head with what I think I know, but knowing what I know and knowing what I don't know, and using the experience of other drive coaches to just get better every match.
I like that, seeing things you like in other drive coaches and emulating that. That's cool.
I'm just touching upon that. My first ever year drive coaching, I had the privilege of winning a regional with Mr. Blay here, and learning how he ran the strategy meeting really was beneficial with Dom. Was really beneficial to my career and success as a drive coach. So I'm happy to be able to learn from the best.
I think that's such a key is just I think for any role that you have, not just FRC whatever, it's just surround yourself with people who are awesome and then pick up anything you can. I think if I think early on when I started drive coaching, we'd have matches with amazing teams. All right, what is this drive coach doing? I remember in 2013 and 2012, we were at champs. We did not make playoffs because we were real bad, and I would just sneak onto the down on the field, and I would just sit behind the glass and just try to listen to what the drive coaches on the best teams were doing and saying. And that was actually really fun. But it was really illuminating.
Very cool. Real quick, we didn't get this. How long have you all been drive coaching?
Since 2011.
2016 for me.
2013. 2023.
23. Very cool. Did that spark any questions from the audience?
I have a question regarding in matches. As you guys mentioned, obviously you want to make sure your strategy before the match is as good as possible, everyone's on the same page. But if something for some reason changes, what do you guys think is the best way to go about handling that change?
That's a great question.
Very close to that, I had one down here. When do you decide to throw out the plan and call an audible versus just forcing the plan that was originally called?
I think having contingencies that plays into it. It's like, if this happens, what do we do? That comes, there's a lot that goes into that, right? There's scouting, there's analysis by other people who are like, this might happen, this team. We think, like, Brendan over there is our head of strategy, and he will often, he's right there. He'll often tell me, like, before a match, I think this team might come over to play defense, or I think this team is likely to play defense, or there's like a 25% chance, right? So then we as Lions can mention that and say, like, okay, if they come over, where do we think they're gonna go, and what do we do? So, like, having contingencies really helps. Having a good understanding of the flow of the game and match really helps. Being on top of the score, like, it's such a complex thing because there's so many parts that go into it. Yeah.
I think communication is a really big part, and I look. This is another thing I learned from Joe along the way. My goal is to get my team to a point where they don't need me, right? I like to take a step back and try to review the alliance as a whole. I should be able to understand at any moment what any one robot is going to be doing, and if something needs to change, I don't want to have to hear it from a team that's 2 driver stations down from me and relay that to my team. So I try standing in the middle, being able to hear everything that's going on. As soon as I see something, I'm able to then change the strategy for my own team, along with for the whole alliance. But that comes with the big contingency. Are your drivers strong enough to operate a simple match strategy without you there? So it's a lot of preparation getting to that point.
And even the talk when you're coming up with this strategy for the match, you should have in mind like an amount of variance of how likely a robot or 2 in your alliance is to, like, disassemble in the field, right? Like, if you're working with 3 robots that have been performing magnificently the whole day, you will take that variance slot and, like, shrink it very much, and you'll have more exact strategies and paths you'll take. But I think within the strategy for what the match should be, there should be sort of less exactness in what's going to happen if you know that things can change. And, the strategy was contingent on Robot A moving. Robot A doesn't move anymore. And a lot of times when Robot A doesn't move anymore, it had to do something that was necessary for a ranking point. So Robot B is now going to try to still get that ranking point. And the tricky thing now is, are they going to get that ranking point and the ranking point they were supposed to get? Or are they going to half both of them and then just get no ranking points? These are the kind of dilemmas you're going to face in the moment of the match when you have to make a quick, snappy decision. Forget that ranking point, focus on that. And that's just creating a model in your head as to how the game works, which ranking points are feasible in given times, which robots perform better at getting those ranking points. When I say which robots, it's not to a specific team, it's to a specific mechanism. Like, you've seen this mechanism does this faster. So you're gonna, like, create with time those models in your head that allow you to decide, I'm sacrificing this, I'm keeping this. At the end of the day, if you're in playoffs, the goal is to win more. If you're still in the scheduled matches, the goal is to get ranking points. And so obviously what you're going to do is going to vary depending on what kind of match you're playing.
You bring up some good points. So we go into every match with 2 key strategies, right? The first one is I want to get all the ranking points there are. But at the end of the day, you get 3 points or 2 points depending on the year from winning. Winning's got to come first. So we might play a little less aggressive scoring L4 Coral if we're trying to get all the ranking points. But if we're just trying to win and we're not really going to care about those extra ranking points, then we're just going to score all L4. And that might change throughout the match.
At Lehigh last year, the first Mid-Atlantic District Championships, there were a few teams that started adopting the strategy of, before the match, pick a specific time left in the match at 1 minute and 45 seconds. If we are ahead by more than 40 points, it's okay to play for the ranking point. Go down to L3, go down to L2. But if at 1 minute left in the match, if it's close, give up on the choral ranking point and go for the win. So predetermining those could make sure the whole alliance is on the same page. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else out there? In blue.
So all of your teams are different, are in different spots. Obviously, they're all different, just different ranks around the world. But at what point, when you're strategizing with other teams before matches, or when you're behind the glass, either in queue before match or when you're during the match, do you at what point do you have to, when you realize you have to give up your lead of that strategy to either the better team or a team with better what makes you that deciding of, I want to be in charge of here, or maybe I'm with team X who is definitely better prepared? What indications do you get from there, or do you have a different philosophy on that?
Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sorry. So, Joe had to step out for a little bit, but my name is Naveed. I'm the head mentor, this other head mentor for 694. I'm essentially Joe's backup drive coach, but I'm also the drive coach for the second team that Sty is starting, 516. And I've drive coached a bunch of different off seasons here and there. So I have some experience with this stuff. But I've been with 694 for over a decade now as a student and as a mentor. I think I'll answer that question first, starting off with a brief story. So this is going back to our experience at Chesney Champs this past season. We were the number 2 seed, or number 2 captains, and our first pick was 44-14 High Tide. And obviously High Tide is a world-renowned team. They were in World's Finals, everyone knows that. In comparison, especially in Chesney Champs, we are that team that came from the East Coast that did really well. We have that notoriety a little bit, but obviously at Chesney Champs, everyone's a big dog there. We're usually, in my opinion, we're pretty vocal about leading a strategy during qualification matches, especially, and then definitely during elims. We're always vocal about making sure we are heard and giving our input. Even if let's say we're not the captain or first pick, we're still trying to give our opinions and make sure that we're heard. At Chesney Champs, though, it was a little bit different because obviously 44-14 did not perform as well as they hoped during quals. And we also didn't want to ruffle the feathers too much, so we kind of stepped aside a little bit to allow them to take more of a role, especially because they are who they are. I think it was a learning experience for us that we are capable of being on that level and we could have our opinion there. But I think more than anything, it's just you need to not be afraid of vocalizing your opinion. Students, adult drive coaches, whoever, you cannot let another team, whatever their ability is, scare you to doing something or not saying something, no matter what level your team is at that moment.
Yeah, similar story, and that it comes with respect, right? If you want to be heard, you have to be respectful. And one rule that I always follow is I'll never say no. I'm never going to say no, that strategy is not the right one. Hey, that might work, but this is what we were thinking. And phrasing it as a question or a second offering rather than shutting down their idea is really going to potentially open up more conversation. But the story I was going to share actually happened this past year at Champs. We had a match with Elevate, who they've come to New York City a bunch, and they were giving us a tough time about saying what we wanted to do in our strategy. And walking past was Jesper, who is the drive coach for Barker, 4613, who we had the privilege of playing with the year prior. And he told Elevate, no, Pobot's good. Like, listen to them. So the moral of that story is it doesn't matter how good you are or how good you're not. What it really comes down to is the relationships and trust that you've built, right? I never go into a match of 694 saying I'm going to have to throw some input here with strategy because I trust them. I've worked with them a bunch in the past. While there's teams that I don't know, then I'm like, all right, I don't know what you're about. I'm going to have to come with some more advice, and maybe you'll surprise me. But I have to be prepared. So it really just depends on who you know and who you don't know, rather than the level of that play. There's some really poor teams out there that I know that they're good strategists and they just don't execute as well. But there's no reason to take charge either.
Actually, this is the part of a match that's the closest to a business negotiation, right? Of two people shaking hands, and there's going to be trade-offs. You know, you don't want to be too close-minded. You want to keep an open mind, but not so open that your grades fall out, right? And so there's that balance there. And what I found myself thinking during conversations, where there's obviously a clash in strategy, is you also need to look at the bigger picture, which is the whole regional. In that regional, are you in a picking position? Is the team you're talking to a team that you're likely going to be a good need for them? And so you would want the match to go in a way that they'd want to pick you? Is the strategy that they're saying, in your opinion, so detrimental to how you look that the other alliance, the other teams that you thought might pick you wouldn't pick you because of that match? You need to account for things in a larger sense, like with the regional. We had that Worlds. We had the match with Blazing Bulldogs. It's Blazing Bulldogs, right? One of the best in the world, one of the most experienced teams in the world. Strategy, good. There was a big disagreement. We had the stationary shooter that was really high and slow. So ferrying for our robot was not a good thing. In order for us to ferry, we had to go all the way to the other side, and when we're right there by the speaker, instead of shooting in the speaker, like miss and hope it doesn't get out of the field and land back down. Our robot wasn't for ferrying, and our driver didn't really do it, so he was uncomfortable with ferrying. But the clash was, Blazing Bulldogs insisted the strategy for this match, you will do nothing but ferry. And now this is a problem, because forget clashes of strategy. My driver is not comfortable with doing something that this elite world team is telling me to do. What do I do in this situation? Well, in this situation, I went with my driver is not comfortable doing it, but also it came with a very neat sacrifice, which is they're probably not picking us. They're not picking us that day, right? So that's the extra thing to consider. At the whole regional level, I mean, we had a match, and he told me to do something for defense. I wanted to do another kind of defense. In this situation, we were also in a position where they would have been in a really good position to picked early on. But in that situation, I'd rather get picked later, right? So how much I let go of strategies also depended on, does it optimize my overall chances at performing well at this regional?
Absolutely.
That's quite a meta-analysis of how to approach that. That's cool. The next question I had tied into that, I need to poll the audience. How many teams here are regional teams? And how many district teams? All right. The reason I ask that, the next question is going to be, when you're doing match strat, is it you doing it, or do you have a strategy lead that goes out, talks to the other teams, and comes back to report to you? And I think this might be split from what I was reading on regional versus district, because at districts, you have 4 match turnarounds. There might not be time to get back from the field, sync up with your drive team, talk about the previous match, and then go do strat. You're already going back out. So how do you approach that? How do your teams do that strategy? Is it you, or is it your strat lead?
I'm just gonna cough.
You want to take that, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's something that I take a lot of pride in doing myself, obviously with students around. You know, this is not a mentor-only gig here. But we do have a full analytics team in the stands who, in between matches of me on the field, they're preparing the match setup for our next match. So that way the data is already on my tablet, ready to have that discussion. I know they're not here today, but the Robo Tigers do not do that, right? They have a strategy team that goes around and relay that information to their coach. So I don't know if it's different for you. I know Joe's involved.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, 694 has a very large and, I think, very robust strategy team, and it's led by a lead and a co-lead, or we call it director and assistant director. They're the ones in charge of organizing and solidifying the strategy, but also organizing the scouting in the stands, making sure our pick list is getting organized and completed. They might not be the ones directly doing every single task, but they're organizing the people that are leading separate things. Obviously, this is a result of 694 being such a large team. We could delegate things on a much larger scale, but generally speaking, we always have at least two people that what we call match strategists. They go around, they take the information that our scouts are getting from watching the matches, take that information and then develop a match strategy for whatever the qualification matches, and then they go talk to our partners, sometimes with Joe, sometimes without him, depending on like the match and their comfort level. And they themselves coordinate with the other partners, and then adapt the strategy as needed. I think the short turnaround time that you mentioned is interesting. We've experienced that at, like, for example, Brunswick and other off seasons that have really short turnarounds. Something that we've tried doing, and we do all the time actually, is we try to prepare qualification matches at least as early as possible with initial strategies, because we know what strategy we want to play ideally, and we have a general idea of what most of the other teams are capable of, and sometimes that strategy is just adapted based on new information that we receive from scouting. But we generally try to keep at least like 3 matches minimum ahead for match strategy. They're usually much more ahead of that, so.
That's awesome.
That's impressive.
We have a strategy student that we like throw around the whole regional chasing around teams. That's just you play with what you have. But the first question, which was about like our approach when we talked about our fondness for learning from how other coaches operate. This was something that I had learned. One day I was at a regional, I was like zoned out, everything was just like, you know, when everything just becomes echoey for a second and you're just like walking and like living the moment. And I noticed, I looked at the top 6 ranked teams and I looked at the coaches for every single one of those teams. And there was either that big thing in the middle with the screen with the match, or there was a TV in the pit. And the coaches, all they were doing was they were standing in front of the TV like this and just like looking at the match, looking at the match, looking at the match. And I was like, oh, I like that idea. And so our schedule sheet started, we like did a little highlighting system where any robot that you're gonna be with in the future, you highlight all their previous matches green, and any robot you're gonna be against in the future, you highlight all their like matches before in red. If you're going to be with them, then against them, you half highlight green, half highlight red. If you're going to be against them, then with them, you half highlight red, half green. And so then, Qual's match 29 is playing. I go, I'm going to be with him, against him. Okay, oh, susceptible to defense. Oh, so it also helps, like for the drive coach or the strategist, to just watch the matches and see what's going on. Because a lot of people reference data from Blue Alliance. That's not the best way to like do things. I mean, when people went back, they changed the robot. Also, it was a different regional with different alliances. It's really hard to track things based on that or based on statistics, right? So
Low bats.
yeah. So I would just look at the matches, and the job of my strategist, he was more of a negotiator, right? Luckily, we're a nonprofit, so also when we go to talk to people for funding, you know, the same kid is talking to them for funding. It's like the kid is a trained negotiator. If you can get people to give you money, you can get like robot B to park and play defense
You're right.
over there.
Spot on. Overlap in skills. Very cool. Anything from the audience tying into that? Back there.
During the match, what's your priority list, or what are in what order, or what things are you prioritizing that you're looking at or you're paying attention to?
So where's your focus?
Yeah, so obviously number one is safety. Always safety, right? On and off the field. If I see anyone, my alliance or the other alliance, stepping over the guardrail, make sure that they don't. But as we get into the match, right? It depends on your strategy going in. If we think there's an opportunity to collect all the ranking points, the strategy is to execute your plan going in and get all those ranking points. If for some reason you don't think that's possible, it's being able to analyze going into that match that, all right, I'm not going to be able to get the coral ranking point because we don't have anyone who could do L1 and we're not co-oping, whatever the instance might be. And how do we focus on winning the match and getting other ranking points? So it really depends on who you're with and who you're against. But overall, the strategy during the match is to execute the strategy that you planned outside the match.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Was your question priority on strat or priority on what you're focusing on, what you're looking at?
Yeah, like literally, like what?
Literally what you're looking
My
at.
apologies.
Okay. Slightly different question. So are you looking at your robot, the other alliance, your partners, the score, the time?
Like during the
Give
match.
me a second.
How do you balance that?
So I think it depends on what member of drive team you are. Obviously, if you're the driver, I do not want you looking at other robots really. Focus on our robot, make sure it's going to the right spot. I think as a drive coach, it depends on your team's experience and the level you're at. So for example, if you're a rookie team and it's a driver driving their first ever competition, first ever match, you have to pay a little bit more attention to your team and your robot. Make sure that the driver, you might need to be directing that driver a little bit, like go here, go there, like pick up the coral from this station, go around them, stuff like that. I think as the driver becomes more comfortable and more experienced, that changes. Because what 694 believes is that a drive coach's main responsibility is coaching the driver and making sure they are doing their task. But more importantly, after the driver is able to do that on their own, coach the whole alliance and make sure the alliance as a whole is completing everything. So, taking this year as an example, Joe was constantly watching out for the ranking points. So the coral ranking point especially, making sure that we had all the coral on each level, making sure that we weren't scoring extra pieces when we were trying to achieve that RP, but also making note of the opposing alliance. Like if they are pulling ahead on coral or doing a lot, like putting up more points, then maybe we need to switch up, score more L4s instead of L1s, stuff like that. So the drive coach really, the end goal for a drive coach is to have that overall picture of the whole match, watching all 6 robots ideally, and just keeping an eye on the state of the alliance as a whole. I also think that it is the drive coach's responsibility, especially if you're on that like more experienced team. There, I think, is that responsibility where you need to make sure that the other teams are accomplishing their base objectives. So whether that be, put up like 5 L1s or make sure you get that climb, whatever it might be, it is the drive coach's responsibility to also make sure that your other partners are accomplishing that goal.
The driver, so when you have 2 drivers, right? Some people have 2 drivers, they use the other one as actually another human player. If they have both drivers actually driving, usually the one who's driving the robot has a more continuous task. You know, those wheels are always moving. While the other person has a more discrete task, like press a button here, press a button there. So what we like to do a lot of times is we like to have our second driver be more of the drive coach to the driver who's driving, because they have more room to be able to look and see things, while the drive coach can also like coach the alliance, right, to make sure everything is operating smoothly at that level. That's one of the things we like to do.
just adding on because I didn't hear any. The number one thing I look at is the clock, right? You're as a drive coach, for me at least, the number one thing you do is call important times. If the goal and the strategy is to have someone climb at 25 seconds, you're screaming at 25 seconds. Hey, climb, 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 it's time. And then I know Joe likes to count down from 5, extremely loud. He's always screaming, it's awesome. So to me, just adding in that piece about the clock.
Well, sure. One last thing. Penalties and stuff. Yeah, look at those flags. Look at what's being waved. If you can, try and count. A lot of times the number that's up there on the score, it's not being updated immediately as things are happening. And in order for you to know your state in the match and what you have to do next, a lot of people have like the chance to continue scoring, and they went to park ridiculously early because that was the strat, and they didn't see that like 4 penalties were called, and it cost them the match by like 2 points, right? Because they should have cycled a little more. So you should also be attentive to points and penalties and flags being waved.
The analogy I've seen to that, it's going to be a football analogy. If the quarterback's only staring at their wide receiver that they're trying to target, they might miss someone that's totally wide open over there.
100%.
In robotics, that's your robot. Your robot's your primary focus. If you're not looking at your lines partners or the score or the clock, that could be a wide open receiver, something that's really important that you need to be seeing. So shifting that balance and shifting what you're focused on, pretty important. In yellow. Sorry, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry. We're going to jump to you and then we'll come to y'all.
So you're in the playoffs and you're an alliance captain. We'll say it's Reefscape. You have 2 scoring robots, captain and first pick at the Reef, and then 1 playing defense. How do you, as a drive coach, make sure you're effectively communicating with your first pick and your second pick with your teams where you've never been with their drive team or been with their drive team for a few matches? How do you make sure you're getting information across in a way that's not overly complex, but still concise enough that you're not losing yourself in words?
Cool. So how to be concise in the strategy, but also clear and not leaving things undefined.
Yeah, when you don't know like the drive team that you're working with as well.
Cool.
Sorry about that, everybody. It was an emergency, but everything's okay.
Awesome.
Yep.
So the question one more time, how do you, when you're in the playoffs with an alliance, how do you balance the specificness of your discussion with the other teams? And especially if you've never worked with them, how do you tailor your instructions, making sure you don't leave things undefined when you're meeting them for the first time?
So one of the things, I think what is like the number one best thing that we do is when we come together as an alliance for the first time, I always say we're one, there's no turning back, we're one team now, so there's no point in like hiding stuff from each other. Because oftentimes, teams will omit things, right? Like a thing that's giving you an issue, something you're good at, something you're bad at. So I'll say, let's share everything, right? Let's have an open conversation. Let's say everything that's working well for us, everything that's not working well for us, stuff we're good at, stuff we're bad at, what's kind of deteriorating on our robot, what's been giving us issues. And we'll always go first, and I always start with like the most negative stuff I can think of for our robot, because I think that makes everyone else feel a little more open to sharing their stuff. I think starting off on that foot really helps, because then as stuff pops up, you can say like, oh, that thing we were talking about earlier, it's creeping up. Like our climbers, we think it might break if we keep climbing, so it's like, okay, let's not climb in this match, we need it in this match, let's do it. So I think that really helps. Just save time. I don't know if that fully answers your question. But.
Part of what I like to do is try your best to get all the information out prior to the match, right? Once you're in the match, it's going to be really difficult to tell someone you've never worked with to do something new. If you're able to have that conversation before, great. But there are times where you need to change your strategy mid-match, especially if someone's playing defense, you got to call them back to come play offense, something. Because I think that's more what you're here to, right? Well, you need to go into the match with those contingencies. Let's say, hey, we're down by 30 points with a minute left. If we're down by that, I'm going to come get you and tell you to bring your robot up and get ready to score. So that way, when you know I'm coming to you, even if you can't hear me because it's loud, you should have an idea of what I'm there for.
And your alliance, your drivers, like when I say your drivers, I mean all the drivers of the alliance, only one of them do you have experience actually communicating. I see a lot of mistakes drive coaches have made. Has been during a moment of panic when something goes wrong, they'll go to the other driver, and like communicate with them. You're about to communicate with a child whom you've spoken to once, and just yell things out loud. They're very likely not going to understand what you are saying. However, when you talk to, in most situations, the adult behind them, who do effectively communicate with their drivers, hopefully, they'll communicate with them better than you will. That's all right? Talk to the other drive coaches, right? Try to get maybe your drivers to, if you can increase interaction between drive teams overall, do it. But at the end of the day, during the match, drive coaches should communicate and they should plan ahead on communicating.
I do think it depends. I do know this isn't for playoffs, but just like quals matches, as you go through the gauntlet of districts or regionals, you're gonna have matches with very inexperienced teams. And I remember distinctly one match where this team was just like not moving properly. No, it wasn't Ian. and I'm like, what's going on? It's like this kid doesn't know how arcade drive works. Like on his joystick, like he doesn't actually know like how to control this robot that he's controlling. It's like I, in that moment, talked the kid through what their controls were because they were just like a pretty basic one. It's like sometimes you need to talk directly to the kid. It depends on who the drive coach is, but Nas is totally right. Like you want that communication to flow through the drive coach so that they can make the adjustment appropriately. But you also have to feel out when the drive coach is just like a warm body because that will happen as well.
Wait, in yellow next.
Yeah, you guys play with a huge range of different teams, like from maybe the rookie team who's got 8 students and a mentor who's never done robotics, to going to Charity Champs and playing with 4413. Where did you change your approach most between this range, like both in strategy preparation, the things we will talk about, and mid-match?
So my answer is you don't. I think that if you want to be successful, you need to stay true to your strategy no matter what. Obviously, there's going to be times where you have to give extra guidance to a younger team, and there's going to be times where you could be a little bit more laid back because there's someone with experience who's able to understand what you're saying. One example I will give is at the New York City Regional in 2023, we needed 4 ranking points in our last match in order to rank 3 and have a chance of getting the champs. And we were with 2 teams who were subpar, and most people would have just sat down and said, all right, we're with these teams, let's build out a strategy that's not really going to utilize them in their best interest. But we knew that we needed 4 ranking points no matter what. So we didn't veer from our strategy, but we included them. And we were able to secure those 4 ranking points doing so, which was honestly, I'm still surprised to this day. It was that incredible. So personally, the Pobots, we don't. We like to keep our strategy the same, match in and match out, and have those conversations at the level that meets the team needs.
I feel like it's, a lot of it's like the strength of the teams, but I think the personalities in the conversation affect a lot, and those personalities are shaped by the strength of the robots, right? Like, High Tide's going to feel differently about their robot than, a rookie team, and, I do think it changes. Definitely like your ability to make more complex strategies, right? You're going to have more of that ability if you play with more top teams. You could do more diverse strategies where I'd say, with younger teams, inexperienced people, you're going to want to keep things much simpler because you're going to be able to execute it, whereas you can get more complex with stronger teams. But I will say, one of the things that has surprised me the most over the years is how many teams that you think of as like, wow, that team's incredible, because you look at their robot and their robot's incredible, and then you talk to them and it's like their understanding of strategy might not be the best, or like their ability to lead a strategy conversation is actually like not there. They just build great robots, and some teams are like arrogant about that, and that's always like a difficult thing to address. Some teams are like, we're great robots, we don't do strategy that well, we're here to listen, and they're great to work with, but you shouldn't go in going like, okay, this is this great robot, they got it. We'll just do what we say. You should have a plan of your own and be ready to lead when appropriate. I think definitely like when you're with some of the top teams, you kind of defer to them more. One of the hardest things I think in FRC is when you have 3 top teams on an alliance, and that's why. I think that's a big part of why you see the same teams on Einstein every year. It's because those teams who are on Einstein every year, they garner the respect of top teams still. It's like Citrus is on Alliance, and they might be on Alliance with 118 and 148, but Citrus is leading that conversation because of who they are. But like on a different side of things, you have like teams that might not know each other, but are the tops of their regions, right? And they're a champ, so you're like, why did that alliance not work? I thought those were 3 really great robots. I thought it was perfect. Why did that alliance get eliminated in quarters? Or, I guess, round 2. Yeah. It's because of that. I think.
When you think of like a team that's gonna start doing FRC, right? Usually it's about the robot, right? More experienced teams see FRC as a very strategic valve. Right, this is not. There's a differentiator when you're talking. If I'm having a conversation with High Tech, right, and then I'm having a conversation with Team 20,000 because that's gonna be a rookie team one day. What's likely gonna happen is the younger team with say 8 people didn't have a lot of time to do the extra things, like, for example, read the rules, or understand what these acronyms are. So, when I started in FRC, when I walked into my first strategy match in high school, and I just hear all these like, so for the RP we're gonna do this, for the co-op or or someone will throw super cycle. What the hell's that? Like a lot of vocabulary and acronyms and things that are more likely to be understood by someone with more experience in a given situation. And so if you're talking to a team that you don't think knows, like, be more clear, like make sure they know what you are saying, and be more careful about penalties. Make sure they know. I would presume High Tide knows if you pass that red line, you're gonna get a penalty, right? So just your strategy shouldn't change much. I agree, but the things that you emphasize in the conversation should absolutely change, because you have a beautiful strategy, and then the robot didn't know that you can't go there, and then they just camp and get you 100 points in penalties, right?
One good trick that I have with that is instead of framing it as that penalty is 5 points, that penalty is 10 points, I always frame it as game piece. Like that's the equivalent of them scoring 2 on L4, right? Which is more than you're going to stop them from each match, like playing great defense. So you got to make sure you avoid the penalties. Like I think that really helps, because if the kid's like inexperienced with the game, it's like 5 points. What does that mean? They're scoring 250 points, like whatever. Yeah.
I think you mentioned 2 things there when the rules came up. How do you on your teams go about personally understanding the rules and simplifying them for your drive team, so your drive team knows just the ones that are crucial there? And in alliance discussions, do you bring up rules to make sure the other teams know? When do you bring that up? How do you go about learning those on each of your drive teams?
I mean, we as a team on kickoff, we read the rules together. Like we go through the whole game manual on kickoff, so that helps. With the drive team specifically, I'm always sending them matches to watch. They should be kind of watching on their own. I think there's like an expectation of a level of rules, but every once in a while something will slip through the cracks, and they go through with that kid. But I think generally on our drive team we're pretty good at the kids hold themselves accountable, and the expectations are high with regards to knowing the rules. Then again, in 2024, this is like nightmare fuel for me. We were like getting ready for playoffs, and I was telling, we had you got the 4th coach, because you have your 4th alliance partner who's not on the field, and I said to the 4th coach that they should keep track of how many notes we've scored in the speaker under amplification, so that we don't score 5th, right? Because it clears after 4. So I was like, okay, so you're gonna count, we're done, we're clear. And apparently our driver turned to our operator after that and was like, why does he keep talking about 4 notes? Like, what is that? I found out about this. Thankfully, they didn't tell me about this till after the competition, but I'm like, okay. No, we have a new driver next year. He graduated. But with other teams, I think you have to. I think having an idea of like important rules is really like what could they come across this team based on the strategy they're playing, and then highlight that. You can't talk about everything.
It was something similar. We on kickoff, we read the whole rule book. First is really good at if it's not in the rule book, it's not a rule, and I think it's really important to understand what those boundaries are. It's the expectation. At minimum, you know every rule pertinent to the game when you're on the drive team. Not to sound cocky at all, but if you're not going to be willing to put in the work to learn those rules, I could find another driver who is. So to me, that's just the bare minimum.
Previously, when we talked about like negotiating with alliances and like when to listen to this strategy or this strategy, if the strategy team that I'm talking to doesn't know what the rules of the game are, and they tell me, "Oh, I have an idea. Go do this thing that is like so legal." Right? That is to me like a door shut. Your strategies, I'm not. You didn't read the rules, right? It's the number one thing. But also, when you're reading the rules at the beginning, when the game comes out, you really want to look at the points and the numbers and the ranking points. Ranking points are what are going to make you rank high. So it's going to be part of it. It's going to be engraved. The rule book is engraved into the design of your robot, right? A lot of people actually don't read it in detail until a competition comes up, but then they have a part of their robot that more easily gets a penalty. That's more easily exposed to those kind of things happening, and so you want to religiously look at those numbers. Look at treat it. It is really a game in the sense that it's a game theoretic game. Like a lot of times, co-op is something really interesting that comes out of some game theory book. It's really interesting when it comes to how other people are going to respond. You have to like imagine those things when the season starts. Imagine living in a regional and what's going to happen. So try to like live a regional in your head according to the rule book to like best internalize what you're reading.
Cool. Gray hat in the back.
Yeah. When setting up a drive team, especially if you're going through a transition point as a team, students graduating and you're getting a lot of new rookies, what do you recommend in helping to find those who are going to be your best drive team as like your A team, and then do you also create like a B and a C squad of students?
So, a couple important pieces of advice. Don't put a rookie on the drive team. Determine your drive team as early as possible. Figure out who your drivers are before the game. You do not need to know what the game is. You do not need to. Don't do tryouts with the robot that you're playing with. That is a really, really bad idea. That kills robot testing time. That is something that is not realistic to do in the season. You're delusional if you think that you're going to do that. You're just going to end up picking the kid who's most involved, which is a good thing to check on drivers. Like drivers should be very involved, right? And on some teams you want your driver to be the most involved person, but that's not a fair way to do it, and you're not getting all the information you could, and you're just doing that because it was procrastination. So don't wait. And then with human players, we do wait for the game because there's some games where it's like really specific. We run tryouts as early as possible, and like week 2, where we've had our human player decided usually. Those are going to be like, we'll weigh things like how important is the role, how easy is the role. Is it more important to have like an extra technician? Do it early is my number one piece of advice.
Yeah, similar here. We don't like to put freshmen and rookies on drive team. In the past, we've actually been putting a lot of sophomores and letting them drive for 3 years. That's how we feel like you have the most game experience along with robotics experience to perform well. We normally do, when it's time to make that transition, we'll set up a course in the cafeteria. That's our practice field. We don't have the luxury of space. And we'll do some kind of time trial where I'm behind them as the drive coach, yelling instructions to simulate a high pressure scenario. And similarly with human player, we know who we want to be the human player if there's not adverse skill needed, but the expectation's always there. Let's say you're shooting hoops this year. well, sorry, our 5'1" human player, you would not be getting the call. So it really depends on the game. So we wait for that. There's one more thing I wanted to say, but I guess it's not important.
And the one thing you want to see, other than you want to see your driver's driving ability, of course. You want to see your driver's ability to communicate. I prefer to see, especially we're competing usually in New York or Gotham, one of the New Yorks, where a lot of teams in this side of the world are, developing, right? And so, specifically in New York, as a drive coach, I'd rather be able to move around the alliance, which means it's even a higher priority for the driver to be able to make strategic decisions and not be like an NPC, right? Where, I was told move straight and then turn. There's a robot there. I'm still gonna move straight and try and turn. And I'm gonna continue to try and do that and not think, I can go around, right? So pay attention to, and you might not have a feel to be able to, but that kind of skill can actually be tested a variety of ways. The ability to adapt to change and make a decision. So a lot of times you can see it in a mechanical student when they didn't have something and they needed to get something done. They put together a tool and got it done. They didn't stop at the obstacle and just stare at it. So you want that kind of a feature in your driver, especially in regions where you're going to be like moving around the whole lines.
One thing I just want to add real quick is one of the tools we utilize that all teams can utilize regardless of resources is XRC Simulator. Great for a first stage of tryouts so that you can cull the herd a little bit. So it's like, let's say you have 30 students on your team. How many of them want to be a driver if you like send out open tryouts, maybe 10, 15 kids, right? It's like, how realistic is it time-wise, robot resource-wise, to try out all of those kids on a robot? Well, what we do is you have to set a certain score on XRC, and we do like a scouting homework, like watch all our matches from this event and give feedback. And 5 kids won't do it, and great, you didn't put in the effort, so you don't get it, right? This is a high effort thing, great. And then you see some people are like sloppy, and it's like, okay, we'll let you continue, we'll take that with a grain of salt. And then in front of the robot, maybe you get 5 kids, and that can be more manageable, right? So I think that's a huge hack that saves us a ton of tryout time.
Very cool. Right here in green.
I wanted to know, like, if you're in a slump, you're like losing a couple of games, how do you, as the drive coach, best get your drive team back into the mindset of winning?
That is a really great question. We had a really tough match schedule at Champs this year, and I think we lost like 5 of our first 6 matches, or 4 of our first 5, something like that. And you could see it was, tough on not just the drive team, the whole team, right? And it was not like we weren't playing great, but we weren't winning matches, and there was like not much we could do about it. I think that those are really tough situations, especially depending on like what your robot skill like level is. You can't really control everything, even if you do everything perfectly. So I think getting the drive team to focus, or just your team to focus on process is number 1, right? It's just like, are we doing the things that's within our control properly? Yes. Okay. We're upset that we're not winning. We're executing everything that we can. Let's be proud of that. So like highlighting the positive. And if there is negative, like what do we need to improve on? Like we're not executing. We're losing because we are not taking care of what we need to take care of. Let's watch the footage. Let's figure out what the little things are. Let's make sure we're improving systematically, and like calling that out if that's what's causing it. I think is important. It's really hard though.
Yeah, we have a debrief meeting after every single match, regardless win loss. We don't do everything perfectly. We still debrief and figure out what we could have done better. So part of being in a slump is being able to get out of that slump and changing the culture and the mindset of your drive team at that moment. So when you're doing that match review after every single match, you're able to highlight the positives and negatives at that time. And if you're able to highlight positives after every match, whether it's a win or a loss, it helps dig them out of that grave a little bit more. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's always going to be that challenge, but that's something that we do to help.
If during the match, your driver moved the joystick the wrong way and it cost you the match, you got your penalty, something happened. As in all conversations, be constructive. If you just keep yelling the same thing that I believe the driver saw, right? All you're doing right now is, well, you're just playing with, first off, the emotional health of a student. But with that will come, they're also likely to make that mistake, by the way, more, just out of panic, right? This whole thing it's a negotiation of, you want a combination of being cool with also students knowing, no, this was absolutely wrong, this was careless. Everybody makes mistakes, right? There's a minimum of like mistakes that will be made. But then there's like a little increase that happens due to not thinking and doing something carelessly. Like if someone loses something because they placed it like on a table and then just walked away, every way it could have got lost that they have now introduced to the system, that's now on making that mistake. So emphasize that. Emphasize the mistake that was made and why you think. But also, you should have the kind of relationship with your driver that your driver feels like they can talk back. They can it's not this kind of thing. I talk, you be quiet. Like there should be this kind of. If you disagree with me, tell me. Tell me right now. Do you think I'm speaking something wrong? And you should have that kind of relationship with not just your driver, but your mechanical team. All of them. They should be able to disagree with you, so that it's an actual conversation. And so it just increases. If you want to make a grand statement, you'll also have to be right and back it up with real information. And that's more likely to lead to a productive conversation rather than just a hurtful one.
Awesome. We got about a minute left. I had one question that tied into what you're saying at the end with the students' mental health. At a tournament, there are long days, stressful days. How, as a coach, what can you do to make sure the students' mental health and their physical health? How are we drinking water? Are we going to the bathroom? Are we eating food? Are those things that your coach manages? How do your team make sure that's all kept in check?
So, a couple things. One, it's kind of like dovetails off what we were just talking about, is as the adult, I think it's important that when stuff goes wrong, when it's like outward towards the team, like if the driver makes a mistake or whatever it is, you take that, right? Point the finger at yourself because you're an adult, right? And you can handle that. You have the experience to handle that, and it's not going to help the driver. It's not going to help the driver's performance if everyone's coming up to them and saying you did this, that wrong. I think it's important to model those things, like making sure you're eating, you're drinking water, and have you eaten yet? Asking those questions. I wouldn't say I'm on top of that, but definitely you eat and ask those questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass. I'm not a good example. I need Joe to tell me to eat and drink.
I mean, at the end of the day, make sure your students never forget the goal. The point of this entire program was for them to get better at all these skills. Make sure that's the goal, and make sure they're reminded that that's the goal, and that the learning experience was the goal. And that in that way, there is not a loss that could have happened, right? And if there were careless things that happened, they just got better at that. So remind them of those things when they don't necessarily see it because it's just a bad day.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Pebble.